Professor Balal, esteemed Vice Chancellor Dr. Narayanan, my good friend and colleague, Professor Hormiz Tharagan. I believe you're a professor now. Yeah, okay. Hormiz Tharagan. Professor Arvind Kumar, distinguished guests, young students, senior officials like the DC and the Superintendent of Police, journalists, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, I would like to thank Dr. Arvind Kumar for his very generous introduction. I hope this is not how he is guiding his students, because there's a lot of hyperbole, little of truth. But in the profession that I have been in, praise is seldom available, and so I'm willing to accept it, even though it's not quite true. I think it's quite ambitious on my part, I would say overly ambitious on my part, to speak on a subject as broad and complex as the craft of intelligence, its relevance and importance. After coming here, I would say it's almost foolhardy, because I saw some very outstanding presentations over the last 3 days. And I feel rather diffident to speak to these young, aspiring, strategic analysts, because what I'm going to say may not measure up to their understanding of the world and the global situation. However, I have to justify my visit to this place, and therefore I'm here today. I propose to divide my talk today into 7 parts, apart from an introduction and a conclusion. So you'll have to be here for a fairly long time. You're not going to get away with a 10-minute or 15-minute talk. I would start by saying that notwithstanding all the talk that you hear about new threats and unconventional or asymmetric methods available to actual or potential opponents, the truth is that the nature of intelligence has not changed. The craft of intelligence has, however, required adjustments to deal with many newfangled problems and situations. Intelligence remains a constant in a world which is in turmoil and is buffeted by a cornucopia of problems. Consequently, I would say that even as humankind has coexisted with violence through the millennia, and the 20th century itself has been a witness to a series of major conflicts, I do believe that we have no hope of an escape from conflict and war. While accepting the Nobel Peace Prize, President Barack Obama of the United States observed, and I quote, "We must begin by acknowledging the hard truth that we will not eradicate violent conflict in our time." Quote ends. Today, as all these aspiring young analysts told us over the course of the last 3 days, we confront a host of new problems in addition to many existing ones. We see the example of weak states, that is, countries that are at high risk of state failure. There exists today a massive surge in extremist, radicalist and fundamentalist ideas, thoughts and beliefs. There is overall a complete change in the way nations conduct their affairs. We have new version jihad of the IS variety, and state-to-state relations appear to be deteriorating, especially as far as the Asian region is concerned. Therefore, you can quite understand the setting in which I propose to talk today about the role and relevance of intelligence. Take our own immediate neighborhood. China and Pakistan figure most prominently in these calculations. The last 3 days we saw a great deal of talk on this subject. There's a great deal of concern as to where China is headed, the way it is pursuing aggressively its strategic designs, the way it has greatly amplified its military capabilities. Its defense budget is going up. I think it's almost for the 26th time that it has had a double-digit increase in its defense budget to $141.5 billion, and so on and so forth. In the case of Pakistan, despite our caution, we have had 3 wars with Pakistan and maybe another half war in Kargil. We are faced with the fact that Pakistan has one of the world's biggest armies, one that is also rapidly equipped with a growing nuclear arsenal. A country that is experimenting with a whole range of tactical and battlefield nuclear weapons, almost all of which are targeted towards India. The nexus between China and Pakistan is also a matter of grave concern to us, especially in nuclear matters. And therefore, we need to be careful as to how we protect our interests. So, is there a need for intelligence? Quite often you hear people saying, oh, intelligence is an unnecessary requirement in a world where we have so much of technology. I admit that we are a country that possesses considerable defense in depth. But I just mentioned the regional context and the fact that India is situated in one of the most volatile regions of the globe enhances, to my mind, and I hope to convince you by the end of my lecture, you also, about the importance of intelligence, definitely as far as our country is concerned. In 3 of the wars that we fought, one with China in 1962, and 2 with Pakistan in 1965 and 1977, intelligence, or the lack of it, played an important role. Indian intelligence derived several lessons as a result of these conflicts. One prime lesson was to avoid overly dependence on the kind of intelligence provided by so-called friendly countries. Another was not to permit atmospherics, such as the perceived state of relations between countries, to override hard intelligence that may be available. A third lesson learned was the need to develop strategic intelligence and not depend excessively on tactical intelligence. For a long time, intelligence agencies have recognized that the blind spot in intelligence has always been the lack of a qualitative understanding of the phenomena that make up current situations. And I think that's a lesson that we learned particularly after 62, but even more so in subsequent periods. Coming therefore to the range of choices available on how best to defend ourselves against the next generation risks and threats, it is evident that good and accurate intelligence constitutes the first line of defense. Intelligence agencies must necessarily be ahead of the curve to be able to estimate potential threats. Many would say that this is facilitated today by the availability of many new technological advances. But I would like to mention to this audience that there is much more to intelligence than technology. For instance, the scale of new computing and communication technology is available to all levels, and this makes it imperative that intelligence agencies are not only fully clued up about the latest advances in technology, but that they possess other resources in addition to checkmate the enemy. This is particularly relevant when dealing with new generation threats, those that lie just below the radar, as also those posed by low-powered groups. Irrespective of size, challenge, there's an enormous challenge to those who have a first strike advantage, and this applies even to well-organized states. I would like to say at this point that one of the primary difficulties, I say this because people say, why did intelligence not spot this particular threat? One of the primary difficulties is that given the multitude of existing dangers that exist, the ability of intelligence agencies to focus systematically on several potential threats, especially where the parameters of risks and threats are unclear, is often suspect. This results often in failure to anticipate problems that lie just beyond the horizon. This is less so in the case of conventional conflicts such as war, since there already is a great deal of knowledge available. And nations are ready as far as conventional defenses are concerned. All nations, for instance, today have a great deal of knowledge about their enemy states' capabilities, thanks to the intrusive technologies that are available to both military and civilian intelligence agencies. The problem, however, gets magnified when it comes to asymmetric threats, including terrorism, or in dealing with situations in unstable areas, or where non-state actors or irregular forces are employed. Problems get further accentuated when dealing with threats emanating from failed states and chronic low-grade conflict regions. Each and all of them are also quite tech-savvy and inventive, no less than modern states. Hence, well-formulated intelligence strategies are essential, and unless they are available, the country is not in a position to do so. But this is not enough. There are issues that come up in such situations, particularly in dealing with emerging ones, where unruly skills, greater versatility, and adaptability become important. This is not easy. Traditional human intelligence and skills may not be enough. The kind of skills needed to scoop foresight from insufficient data are quite different. This often skirts the metaphysical area of knowledge. They need creative skills, flexible mindsets, and elliptical thinking, for these are the X factors which are useful for predictive intelligence. The investment needed for this purpose is seldom understood or comprehended. The inclination quite often, this is particularly true because intelligence is a much misunderstood area of activity, is to try and downscale component parts of the system. This does have a deleterious impact on our ability to anticipate and prepare for the smaller scale of wars of the future. I wish to stress, particularly to the younger members of this audience, that there's a great deal that separates intelligence from intelligence prediction. There's a wide chasm between the two. These are not easily bridged. The uses and abuses of intelligence are widely mentioned, but there's a great deal of ignorance on difficulties regarding anticipation of nascent developments and emerging risks. While risk and prediction are commonly associated with the world of business, they are very much an unbidden guest in the world of intelligence and strategic threats. All I would say at this point is that given that time flies on fleeting wings, the craft of intelligence will require to match up to both real and potential future dangers that every state faces. I next come to the utility of intelligence. Among intelligence professionals and the community per se, it is common to refer to intelligence as the last 5%. By definition, this is the most difficult to acquire, being the subject of deliberate concealment or denial. Notwithstanding the advent of information communication technologies, leading to a tsunami of instantly available information, ascertaining hidden meanings and true intentions, including of what is concealed, remains by and large extremely difficult. The world, meanwhile, is becoming more complex. Intelligence agencies are required to become more multifaceted. They demand specialist expertise. Success requires a relentless process of professionalization of intelligence, including the establishment of complex intelligence networks to achieve desired results. History has plentiful examples of where good intelligence made a difference to outcome, and the lack of good intelligence led to failure. In the 21st century, it is hard to think of any nation that does not have at least a vestigial national intelligence apparatus. The threat of interstate wars may have receded to some extent, but the risk from insurgencies, terrorism, and other transnational threats has only grown, increasing the value and importance of intelligence. Even states with relatively modest geopolitical pretensions today have reasonable intelligence collection capabilities, including in the cyber domain. Quite a few nations have a global reach, and their intelligence agencies thus have an overarching spread, the United States perhaps being the most preeminent in this regard. On the other hand, many states like India have as their focus regional and domestic aspects. Nevertheless, it is not always that there is a correlation between the geopolitical importance of a state and its intelligence capabilities. Enormous disparities also exist in the professional capacities and still more in the ethical and legal standards of different intelligence agencies. Authoritarian regimes tend to utilize their intelligence and security agencies for regime preservation, suppressing dissent, and checking all forms of opposition to the prevailing leadership. Democratic nations, in varying degrees, tend to be more professional and ethical in their approach. The impact of intelligence on policy also varies as between states. India's intelligence agencies have improved and diversified the sources from which their personnel are recruited. As a result, our agencies have benefited from a diverse portfolio of intellectual disciplines, philosophical leanings, and psychological attitudes and cultural legacies. This is apart from requisite skills. It needs to be acknowledged that this has improved the capability of agencies to think in the vertical realm and also has also encouraged innovative thinking. I now come to the structure of intelligence. The intelligence professional, as all of you are aware, is one of the oldest in the world. Chinese philosopher Sun Tzu's Bingfa on war and Kautilya's Arthashastra set out a statecraft rationale for intelligence work, as also a detailed exposition of tradecraft techniques which are as relevant today as they were when these two great authors put out their works. While intelligence has been around for centuries, the current pattern of intelligence organizations has evolved from around the mid-50s of the 20th century, reflecting many of the imperatives dictated by World War II. Prior to World War II, the United Kingdom had a well-defined external or foreign intelligence agency, the Secret Intelligence Service, a domestic intelligence service that's known as the Secret Service, and a technical intelligence agency, the GCSQ. Some of the other well-known intelligence agencies of today, namely the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States, and several of the US technical intelligence agencies, like the National Security Agency, are byproducts of World War II. Russia's FSB and SVR are derivatives of the pre-World War II NKVD and the latter-day KGB. Prior to World War II, traditional human intelligence was a staple of all intelligence gathering. This was supplemented, in part, by a not very sophisticated signal intelligence capability. This has since undergone a drastic change. From the mid-50s of the 20th century, intelligence agencies have thrived upon wave of innovative technical advances and collection capabilities. This was the era of the U-2 surveillance aircraft, later evolving into satellite imagery, which provided highly sophisticated overhead imagery capabilities, accompanied still later by various forms of detection devices to monitor electronic and chemical emissions. As intelligence became more institutionalized, and given the growing sophistication and capability of intelligence collection, the business of intelligence analysis and assessment has also grown commensurately. Experience dictated the necessity to ensure proper and coordinated analysis of all source intelligence rather than studying these in isolated and stovepipe fashion. Intelligence agencies have hence set up several bodies towards this end. The Joint Intelligence Committee in the United Kingdom was the forerunner of many similar organizations in different parts of the world, including India. India was bequeathed a legacy by the British of a security and intelligence agency, namely the Intelligence Bureau, prior to independence. In the immediate post-independence period, covering a little over 2 decades, the Intelligence Bureau performed a multitude of tasks, looking after both internal and external intelligence. Over the years, the two wings functioned as two distinct compartments reporting to a single director. The system worked well for almost a decade and a half, but the Sino-Indian conflict of 1962 highlighted some of the inherent weaknesses of a single intelligence agency performing multifarious tasks in both the external and internal realm. India had, of necessity, to depend excessively on friendly Western agencies for much of their strategic intelligence, limiting its efforts to tactical intelligence as provided by its own operatives. One of the weak spots in intelligence gathering in 1962, for instance, turned out to be China's intentions, and whether, despite obvious preparations, it would actually resort to an all-out war. India had no access to strategic intelligence that on the 16th of November 1962, that is 4 days before the war broke out, China had given the go-ahead to launch a war across many fronts across India, a decision which was ratified on the 18th of November. Prior to this, India lacked proper intelligence to what extent India's forward policy was provoking China into preparing for a war against India. Immediately, therefore, after the 1962 war, a demand was raised for carving out a separate external intelligence agency, leaving the Intelligence Bureau to deal mainly with domestic intelligence. However, the government at the time felt that rather than split the Intelligence Bureau, it would be best to try and expand the role and capability of the IB so as